All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another exciting Transatlantic AI Exchange session. Today is June 8, 2023. Hey, TAIX is a community of experts who are passionate about collaborating and sharing knowledge about innovative technologies, especially around the hot topic of artificial intelligence. In today's session, we are specifically focusing on a topic directly related to our ongoing global AI hackathon, and its generative AI and synthetic data applications are two of the challenges for the developers, and we decided to invite experts to shed more details behind these topics. My name is Thomas Neubert. I'm born and raised in Germany. I'm actually in a hotel right now here in Aachen, beautiful city. A long-time entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley for over 32 years now. I'm a founder of Transatlantic AI Exchange and a co-founder of the WOW DAO, the first global decentralized autonomous organization for AI developers. Allow me to provide a quick overview of this Transatlantic AI Exchange initiative. First, we want to thank all our partners who are helping us to build this valuable network of over 8,000 members now. For today's session, special thanks goes to EIT Digital Hub Silicon Valley, who is partnering with TAIX to create a series around AI and Web3. We're also happy to announce a new TAIX partner, Crypto Girls Club, who I just met here in Brussels yesterday at an interesting EIT Digital conference about AI in general. At TAIX, we foster exchanges on AI, targeting entrepreneurs and researchers, investors, corporations, the SMB Mittelstand, and governments building long-term partnerships, and focus on hands-on expertise like fundraising, customer engagements, go-to-market strategy and execution, and the SMB Mittelstand understanding the implementation of AI. A quick note on our upcoming events. We have lined up more series of virtual, hybrid, and physical sessions for the year. And as you can see here on the slide, we have some pretty interesting events coming up, not just virtual monthly sessions, which we normally do. We also use our European AI Summit. It's a hybrid event, and this year we are doing it on April 17. And we will be physically joining the Digital Demo Day in Düsseldorf on August 17, where we are hosting our hybrid event at the last evening of that event. We have a hackathon going on, and I hope that that the session today will also help other developers to get motivated and get involved. And then we have another big conference in the pipeline now with a location at the Tech Museum in Mountain View, and the hackathon and the AI Web3 conference will take place on September 28th and 29th. All videos, including today's sessions, are accessible for free, available on our website under the event sections. Please share with your colleagues or watch it again using AI tools. And if you believe our event is of value to you and your network, we absolutely greatly appreciate if you can share and like us on our LinkedIn page so we can grow the community. Yvonne in the background is going to share the link on LinkedIn in the chat box here right now in this session. Maybe a quick comment on the upcoming or the ongoing hackathon. We are in the middle of the global AI hackathon. But developers who are still able to join, especially after today's informative session, are more welcome to do that. If we could share the slide with the hackathon, that would be great. We invite all the participants of our ecosystem to join this hybrid AI web conference. Again, it's physically taking place in Mountain View, but we also using a 3D virtual metaverse environment to also make it public for not just viewing, but also for networking and interacting amongst the members and the viewers. Last but not least, we are excited to announce yet another experienced panel. And of speakers. Today, we are starting with Olaf Groth, who will be set up the session by providing a meta-level overview of the AI in Web3 and blockchain and the DAO trends. But before we go there, I would like to invite all the speakers who are joining us today to turn on their videos before Olaf will give a high-level overview. We have Andreas. He is the VP of Artificial Intelligence at the German company SAP based on the East Coast. He's also a generative AI speaker, an expert, a thought leader, and he is the host of What's the Buzz? And he does live streaming and podcasting. So he will introduce himself with a little bit more details later on. Then we have Patrick Bangert. He is the Senior Vice President of Data Analytics and AI at Sears. Formerly, he was the Vice President of AI at Samsung, SDS America. He will also introduce himself in a few minutes. And I have to admit, I do not know if Amar Hussein is already joining us or if he got lost somewhere for reasons that we don't know. I don't see him online. If he comes online, he is a leader in cloud data and AI transformation. Formerly, he was with Microsoft and Google. And assuming he may or may not join later, I will give him the opportunity to introduce himself. So with that, I would say Olaf Groth, he is joining us right now. Olaf, not only is he a longtime friend of mine for over, 25 plus years, now we're aging ourselves here, but he's also a successful CEO at Cambrian AI, but he's also a professor faculty at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business and Hult International Business School. And he's a very well-known author and speaker on both the topics Web3 and AI. And simply speaking with that, Olaf, please take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, Yvonne, for organizing this. Thank you to EIT, a partner of mine as well. And thank you, panelists, for joining us here today. Thank you, audience, for joining us, because this is a cutting edge, hopefully not bleeding edge, but cutting edge topic. Thank you to Thomas for letting me lead us into this. And without a whole more ado, as they say, let me dive right in. And if Thomas or Yvonne, you could just tell me that my screen is clearly visible.
Yep, it is.
Wonderful. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're looking at essentially two revolutions coinciding, and that's tremendously important for business models. So it's not just an engineering and a science challenge, it's a business model challenge for us, and a really exciting horizon at that. We at Cambrian AI, as well as at Berkeley, are researching this fast and furiously because this is coming just as fast, and we hope to prepare you with this quick presentation. I want to baseline us and show you where we were and where AI was. Okay, this is before GPT, before generative AI hit, 2 years ago. This is a traditional business model canvas from the Web 2 world, right? Web 2, again, remember, multi-sided platforms. A lot of the hyperscalers employ them today. This will look very familiar, or at least feel very familiar, right? If you take very big and well-known platforms, such as Google and AI, of course, a lot of the Chinese companies, LinkedIn and Google, then you will find yourself in this canvas, right? Multi-sided, whether you're a consumer or a producer or a partner. Sometimes you are both, you're a prosumer, engaging with each other. And in the middle of this diagram sits AI, essentially as the market maker, the matchmaker between all of us, figuring out, based on our data footprint, where the match should be made and how much it's worth to each one of us, and how to make that really engaging. And that really gets us to this slide here, which shows the AI in the middle as what my good friend Jeff Moore has called the starter motor, right? The starter motor on a Web 2 platform that allows us to get enlisted and to engage with other people on the platform, with the platform itself, and then the platform monetizing that engagement with whatever it may be, partners like employers if you're on LinkedIn, headhunters, etc., or advertisers, right? So that matchmaker in the middle, that starter motor, really, that's not just a starter motor, that's a permanent motor. That is where the AI power resides today, obviously on massive compute power, powered by companies such as NVIDIA. So this is where we were. This is where we are drifting. Okay, so if you look at this now, this is essentially the business canvas flipped around, right? You have the top layer, which is familiar. That's the application layer. That's what I just showed you in the business canvas. That's what these platforms are putting us on. Okay, and you have AI in the middle there, and the white crosshairs here. Now, Web3 adds another layer below that, and that is the developer and governance layer, right? This is where the decentralization now happens. And so this is where the new forms of AI are hitting. That doesn't mean that the top layer goes away. That's still there. But in addition, we've got the bottom layer on governance, ownership, and development. Okay, so keep that model in mind as I'm now diving into the different use case areas. Use case number one, distributed compute power and data resources, right? This is where AI gets to work, and I'll explain why. Number two, decentralized ownership, monetization, and governance. AI plays a big role in making that happen. And number three, assuring authenticity and trust in Web3, both in terms of the quality and the authenticity and the trustworthiness of the actual services that you're on, the Web3 service providers, but also the actual people transacting with you on those blockchains. And then number three, this is, I think, one of the biggest ones that is very new, but potentially tremendous revenue potential, and that is really the creation of a reference currency and an AI-powered agent economy, right? So this is bots trading. Now, let me unpack this a little bit, okay? Because I know there is a lot here. So today, these large platforms are owned by large platform providers, right? Google has its own cloud services in the middle, as does Amazon, as does Microsoft, as does Intel, incidentally, right? And so, so they have massive farms of GPUs and other processors there that are very expensive, and they need to be monetized. And so everything is tied toward those cloud service centers. Now, today we're seeing the emergence of edge computing. You've heard that many times, right? So this is the Internet of Everything, Internet of Things, as they say, where the edge receives more compute power because there are some things that you can do better because of lower latency on your handheld device or in the car, where you don't want to waste a lot of time transacting data between here and the cloud center. And so, so that's number one. It's also, incidentally, leveraging the privacy trend, because you can now assure privacy on your handheld or on your end user device better and more directly than you could in the cloud. And so right now we are seeing AI, especially generative AI, being put to use on these end user devices in order to power those new algorithms. And that is, again, enabled by very big names on the GPU, CPU, and radio interface side, such as NVIDIA and Qualcomm. And people who are already doing this with AI are blockchain web services, for instance, or Filecoin. The second use case that I went through, or that I've foreshadowed, is the one on distributed ownership and governance. So with DAOs, this is what Thomas mentioned earlier, decentralized autonomous organizations, I can now have a crowd govern a platform while being completely diffused and decentralized. And really the contracts, the smart contracts in the middle, are powered by, in future, generative AI. So in this case, then, the owners can be many-fold and don't just have to be one large corporation with Wall Street-based shareholders. Number three here, and I apologize, a little text-heavy, but I'm happy to make this deck available afterwards to any of you who want to see it as well, is this authenticity and trust assurance in two ways. One, using smart contracts to verify that the service you're getting on a blockchain, Web3 is blockchain, right? that is actually the same service everybody else is getting and the same service that they were told they were getting. So the authenticity of the actual service governed by smart contracts. Now, then you're transacting on that blockchain with other people. And again, smart contracts here are generating insights and data telling you this is authentic, you can trust it, you can go ahead. And this is what we call zero knowledge proof, which means you don't have to have any knowledge of any of the stuff that's going on as long as the smart contract tells you this is exactly as you were told it should be. And then finally, and like I said, one of the most exciting things that I think is happening is that currently KYC on many of these platforms is a very expensive undertaking, and that can be automated with agents that essentially talk to and trade with other agents. So the agent actually, generative AI powered, I should say, agent, understands what the other agent is, what the other agent represents, and starts to verify that authenticity with each other, characterizes the customer behind the other agent, and then transacts with that agent. So here we have marketplaces of generative AI-driven bots that, of course, don't have access to fiat currency, the normal cash that you and I have in our bank accounts, nor should they, but we can make portfolios of cryptocurrencies available on these platforms that then get, of course, converted into hard cash later. And so these bots can essentially tap into blockchains, right, with generative AI, understanding what kind of currency, what kind of coin is available, what kind of coin the other bot accepts in order to facilitate that transaction execute on a particular smart contract charter. So you can use that, for instance, for compute power provisioning, file storage, creating synthetic data, for instance, right, topic of the day, transacting and then settling payments. I should say here as I close out, right, in this one right here, I should have said that when we guard for trust and authenticity, it's not just against things like deep fakes and fraud and cyber attacks and things like that, where people are impersonating each other. You know, generative data itself, synthetic data, I should say, can be used for things like digital twinning, hard to simulate, hard to gather edge cases. You can simulate with synthetic data. All of that can be generated by generative AI within Web3 models and blockchains. So with that, hopefully I've stayed roughly within the time limit, Thomas. I want to thank everybody for now. Look forward to the conversation.
Excellent, Olaf, as always. Thank you. Thanks for the overview. A good lineup then for the following speakers to introduce themselves, and then we get into some of the Q&A. So maybe if I can start with Andreas Welch, if you wouldn't mind turning on the video, introducing yourself, have a few comments, and then share your knowledge, and then we go from there in the Q&A later on.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you so much to the audience and for the opportunity to team up with Patrick, Olaf, and Amma and yourself as well again today. So, hey everyone, my name is Andreas Welch. I lead the marketing and solutions team at SAP for artificial intelligence, where we take a look at what does SAP do with AI across the company, across our business applications that power the most well-known brands on this planet and their operations. On one hand, that means, you know, what are the opportunities that you can capitalize on today in the applications that we provide? On the other hand, also, what are the big trends in the industry around AI that we should be incorporating in our own products? And, you know, that just happen to be a few these days. So it's a super exciting time in a super exciting space. Now, I'm also super passionate about the topic of AI and AI literacy and helping others understand how they can become savvier around change management and deploying AI in organizations as it changes the way people work. And that's what you see from me on LinkedIn in the content that I create and share there as well, including my podcast and newsletter. So please do give me a follow if that's something you're interested in, how you can run AI in business successfully. Like I said, very passionate about this topic, and today sharing my personal views on the topic of Web3, Gen AI, and synthetic data. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Patrick Bangert, please, feel free to go and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick. I lead the Data Analytics Artificial Intelligence division at Sears, professional services company. So we do the work. So artificial intelligence is a very interesting area in that it combines many skill sets. I am a mathematician, so I'm familiar most readily with all the algorithms that you see. But actually, most of the work occurs earlier in the data side, preparing the data, cleaning the data, and so on, to make it ready to train the models. That you have the models, and you have to figure out how to deploy them. That, of course, requires a pipeline of tools, from correctly configuring the input data, then making sure that everything is secure and compliant with all the regulatory things that are still very much in flux at this moment in all sorts of jurisdictions. Ethical AI is a big topic to make sure that we're not doing anything that harms anyone. And we, of course, progress to explainability, where we all want to understand, where does this come from? If you ask the generative AI for a number, for example, or a fact, it will apply 42. And then the question is, what question were we asking to get the 42, right? Or why did you give that answer? So there are very aspects and IT tools that surround AI. So I very much agree with the view of it being a starter motor, and looking forward to the discussion here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. And last but not least, we found Amar. He joined. Thank you very much, Amar. Welcome. I already introduced you by name, but please go ahead and introduce yourself. Glad you made it.
Thank you. And apologies, I was overrunning. Actually, a very interestingly enough, I was doing some prep work for some machine learning, especially Gen AI workshops that I have to run in the next week, and so I just got sidetracked about that. Sorry about that. But basically, just a little bit about myself. My background is in machine learning, AI, data. Not too recently, I was a director of data and AI at Microsoft, and previous to that, I was leading the conversational AI capability within Google here in the UK. And this right now, I have my own company where I basically teach about AI and deliver training on Gen AI and machine learning and AI capabilities focused on Google technology specifically and dedicated to Google. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart, and it's something that I've been doing for best part of my life for the last 5 to 10 years. I think there's so much to be done, and there's so much opportunity with this technology out there. But just agreeing with some of the key themes that was mentioned by the previous speakers, Andreas and Patrick, in terms of making sure what I'm really passionate about is that we raise the level of literacy and the education and know-how around the capabilities, the real capabilities of AI and machine learning and what they could be used for. We tackle some of the challenges around fears of AI, which is also a very relevant topic at the moment. Biased in AI systems, how we make sure that we are releasing and building this technology, and most importantly, we're using it fairly so that we don't discriminate against any societies, any communities, any areas, any sections of the societies that we live in, and privacy and security concerns. See, that's some of the topics which I'm really passionate about, and I try my best to provide clarity on these. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself and my background and what I've been doing. And I'm really keen and very excited to join you guys to contribute to this debate.
Excellent. Thanks, Amar. Thanks for joining us. So everybody here has a really interesting background from multiple viewpoints. Olaf as well from the Web3 AI but also from the research and university kind of point of view. So I personally, I am literally calling right now from a German city called Aachen after having been traveling for 5 weeks here in Germany and Brussels, speaking at 6 or 7 different AI events, massive traction, massive noise and positive energy around startups and AI in general. And as can you probably all imagine, at every single event, generative AI and chat GPT is on everybody's mind in some form or fashion. So to set the stage on that, I maybe want to combine 2 questions that we initially had agreed on. And I would like each one of you to share your viewpoints, but also keep in mind that whoever the participants, the developers are, the hackers in our hackathon who may be listening or listening to the video recording later, let's all somehow relate that to the opportunity of what a developer hacker can do with that learning experience from you. So the question to set this all up is, what can Gen AI really do? And what is really the hype about it? And related to that is, what examples outside of chat or chat GPT do you see for generative AI? Maybe I pick on Andreas first, and then anybody can chip in at any time.
Sure. So look, I think generative AI is creating a almost once in a lifetime moment for us in the industry overall, right? It makes it super accessible for the first time, really, this topic of AI, getting your hands on it, doing something with it. And I think that's a big factor why also we are seeing in the industry that ChatGPT is on everybody's mind, right? You can open your browser, you can try it out. It works with natural language. It gives you results that sound like you and I have created it. Let's leave aside the factual inaccuracies for a moment, but it's super accessible. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Also, I would say, and maybe Patrick disagrees with that, but I feel you don't necessarily have to be a data scientist to be working in AI, to be using these technologies. Certainly you need to understand how they work and what the implications of your work are. Also, with regards to ethics and these aspects that we briefly touched on, but also from a developer perspective, it's a lot more accessible, right? It's, not to trivialize it, it's an API, it's prompts, it's prompt engineering, and you can already get really good results for a number of different things. So that's why I think accessibility, on one hand, to developers, on the other hand, also to those using AI, are such big factors in what we're seeing right now and why there's so much excitement.
Patrick, would you agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree that the whole point of artificial intelligence, generative or not, is to put tools into the hands of people to use them who do not understand how those tools were put together. I use the light switch in my house. I use my car. I do not understand how they work at a very deep level. I took an electrical course at some point in high school, but they work. I know how to use them. And the same thing is with AI. I should be able to, as anyone, type a prompt into my browser, get a reasonable response, and be able to work with that without having a clue on how those models work, how they were put together, and so on and so forth. That's the point. AI brings value through automation, automating something. In that case, it's a conversation. Generative AI can automate more things, however, and I think one of the bits that drive real commercial value of them is a co-pilot for writing source code. If you prompt the AI to write you a piece of code about something or other, what you get back is not perfect. And you will have to edit this, but it gives you a productivity gain. On average, we can see it's about 30%. In other words, you need 30% less hours to get to the final product of your source code than you did if you had to write everything from scratch yourself. So it's an automation tool. Enterprise search if I want to search a large number of documents within my company to find an answer to a question, I can use generative AI to do that. It will not give me back the perfect answer or the final answer, but it gets me a very long way into it, and it saves me hours. And those are the automations that Gen AI is actually capable of. A bunch of the things that are being put out there, on LinkedIn and Facebook, are essentially Hollywood visions that are not within reach. But there are some things, like I mentioned, that are absolutely real, that have commercial implications that make your life better. Another example is if you're putting together a slide presentation, there are now tools that bring up a bar on the right. You can type a little prompt, and the generative AI creates you an image that you can immediately put into your slide. And it is exactly what you were looking for. You don't have to search for hours, and you don't have a copyright problem. No one's going to sue you because you put that image in there, right? It's perfect. Again, it saves you hours of your day. That's the point.
I think the copyright thing is a bit of an interesting topic. Sorry,
Go ahead,
I just jumped in there. But I just picked up on that, and I wanted to just highlight that. And Patrick, you make a very good point in terms of the automation and the convenience of this technology. But that exact point about the copyright is, how do you know? How do you know if you've used the rights that you should be using? But at the same time, I think you've got to have the right use case. I think the key thing is identifying the right use cases and making sure that you use the technology with human insight with it as a driver. And there are so many different compelling use cases. I mean, if you some of the ways, if you look at drug development, for example, in pharmaceuticals, right? AI has made such a headway in there as a way to process so many and model so many different scenarios to come up with new inventions there, right? Which is again great. But so I think there's loads of fantastic, impactful use cases. Fraud detection is another one, right? Where you are using Gen AI to pick up patterns in a big data set, or in a corpus of data, to pick out transactions that might be fraudulent. That could be a real use case in the finance industry that's utilized at the moment, and that can have even more progress in that area. Personalization, again and again, we use. I mean, when I was my time in Google, we built a number of these toolings and solutions there, where we built data-driven personalization using AI, custom natural language, custom NLU models, to be able to capture a lot of and predict and capture a lot of the decisions that were coming next, in order for the agent to be ready to respond to that response. So I think there's many use cases there, but there are questions also that we need to think about and make sure that we are aligned ourselves with that accordingly. Yeah.
Ola, feel free.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Allow me to share something real quick, because I think we need to appreciate the use cases against this backdrop, right? So previously, artificial intelligence could not explain meaning, and it couldn't really explain causality unless you gave it a discrete target function, right? So we've just moved from the regular sort of machine learning, statistical learning, to a simulation of heuristic learning. That means you can actually start to explain what's what, right? So this baby right here, right? You would know, or the AI would know, that's not a baseball bat. That's a, that's a toothbrush. What does that mean? It means that I can actually now explain what the user is doing. I can now decide between who is who and what's what, and what does it mean for me in this situation, right? The difference between between a traffic cop and a riot cop. The fact that I'm bringing out an umbrella because it's raining, not, it's not raining because I'm bringing out an umbrella. AI did not understand that. And, in that sense, AI was pretty dumb, right? Now we can distill meaning. And what that means is, if you take a customer journey, and this is really for your hackathon, right? So if I now take an average customer journey in an enterprise, let's say you're a sales executive, You want to create awareness, leave a good impression, drive toward a sale decision, and then ensure customer satisfaction, right? As you close the loop, as you leave good impressions, you cement the customer relationship. You can now do things like truly understanding the customer, KYC, right? That's where it starts. And that's because you can now make inferences about what does the customer say, how important is that, what do they really mean, how do I really satisfy them? If I'm already talking to them, is that working and or not, and why, and what can I do about it? So this more semantic way of learning and expressing causalities and what's what and what's meaning will then allow you to go, develop new types of digital assistants, develop new types of financial models where maybe you can sell a service to somebody that was previously unbankable, right? You can now distinguish more between a human sales rep doing a sales with somebody versus letting a bot take over if it's a simple sale, because you understand what a simple customer problem is versus a more complex problem. You can manage churn. You can adapt more quickly to shifting customer preferences and market demand, right? And you can also upskill your own teams much better because the bots now understand, or are going to understand, what types of skills your salespeople really need moment by moment, situationally, while they're at the front cutting these deals. And that didn't happen before. Now you can.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing the slides. That was very visually helpful. So recently, a few weeks ago, I was at one of the events speaking, and there was an example from the audience that kind of stuck in my head, and I want to throw it out to all of you because I also want to address the developer community in the audience here. And the comment was the following: when the iPhone was initially introduced, it was an app store with like 7 apps or something, like a very small number, super small number. And then almost overnight, some crazy, almost, stupid apps were developed, more toys, you can drink a beer out of it and it looks like it, and it all disappeared. But at the same time, there were other applications that the developer community immediately developed on top of the hardware. And for example, one was the flashlight. Nobody would have thought to, implement a flashlight feature in an iPhone. It just happened, and now we all have it and we are using it. And I'm using that example because it's very visual to me. And the question to all of you is, with ChatGPT and the large language models now getting so much attention and hype, where do you see ideas for the developer community or interesting use cases where in 12 months from now, in 6 months from now, we will have an incredible amount of apps developed or solutions developed on top of conceptually what we just experienced with ChatGPT? Anybody has a vision or some interesting ideas or some problems that a developer can tackle as part of the hackathon?
So for me, there are a couple of things that come to mind. If you don't mind, I can go first.
Go ahead.
And that is, maybe approach it by thinking about it in certain patterns. I think right now we're seeing more of the low-hanging fruit type use cases, the first things, to your point, maybe the flashlight, right? Example and equivalent. And I believe we'll see more mature, more sophisticated use cases as time moves on, as we all learn and do more with it. But maybe a good question to use ChatGPT for is even doing your user research and creating a persona and saying, hey, what problems does somebody face in a certain business function? Maybe it is marketing or it's commerce, and the challenge is, how do I create product descriptions that are really enticing, concise, that get the value across of that product that I'm selling? Or how can I create 5 or 10 different variations of it so I can run my A/B tests and not have to spend time there to type it in myself or get somebody else to do it. But so the combination of at least 2 or 3 things, also building on Patrick's and Amar's argument. I think one is doing user research and using ChatGPT for that. Don't trust everything that it spits out, but it's a good starting point. It's a good sparring partner. Number 2, I think then is identifying that problem and getting more details about it, what the challenges are. And then maybe even number 3, to Patrick's point, see how far you can even use these generative AI tools and models to already create a prototype or create some code that with additional tweaking can get you to a demo or to a proof of concept very, very quickly. So use that as a funnel would be my suggestion.
Okay. Anybody else on that note, like the flashlight example?
Yeah, I think this is definitely interesting, and there are many use cases that are already being talked about and partially implemented. So I think the list of potential use cases is not the problem. It's more the opposite of narrowing that list down and focusing on something that you as a developer actually want to do, and to do it well. One of the principal questions that I'm always faced with in my work is accuracy. Generative AI is not very good at factual accuracy or numerical accuracy, right? So if you have a use case that demands that, then you're facing an additional challenge. So if you use it to generate a nice marketing image, beautiful. Accuracy doesn't matter. The image is roughly right. Great. And then also the amount of development that you will have to put into an application like that is significantly reduced. So thinking about it like that is a helpful thing. The other one is, of course, what does the market want, right? Most people want to do generative AI, not to do generative AI, but to earn money with it. So the question is there a market for it? How big is that market? Are these people going to pay money for the product that you have? So a lot of what I'm seeing currently is generative AI, not so much for the consumer, but rather for the business, using it to automate the business processes around the office or between offices or between humans and technology. I think that's where more of the business opportunities are. One of the things that I'm seeing in the interaction with the consumer is so-called skills. So these are not things that the generative AI natively has, but it's an add-on package. So an example of a skill is form filling. So let's say I describe a vacation I would like to take, and the generative AI will take that description and fill out the form on a travel app with the dates I want to go, the cities I want to go, the airports I want to fly to, the kind of hotels I want to live in, and takes away the labor from me of having to type in all the little forms and making sure everything is correct, and rather just proposes me a full itinerary for my next vacation. Right? That's an example of a skill that would require an add-on software functionality to be added to a large language model, and that would offer, I believe, at least to me, real value in making my life as a consumer easier.
That's a very interesting example. Thank you for sharing.
I might add on to that, Thomas, if I may.
Yeah.
To validate some of what Andreas and Patrick have been saying. So on the first one, I think where Patrick was going was, and Patrick, yank my chain if you think this is not what I should have heard, but the ability of generative AI to start to automate some product or application piloting, right? So bringing out some additional sandbox experimentation, rapid cycle, piloting, mock-ups, et cetera, which can save a lot of money, which goes to Patrick's case that, first of all, there's a lot of process improvement internally you can drive with generative AI. That's certainly something that, New Native, for instance, are developing essentially platforms that allow you to strip the very basic coder out of the pilot development, which is a big efficiency gain. And then the other one is trust assurance with the customer. So yeah, there are issues with hallucinations, as we all know, in generative AI, but there's also the ability to understand what the customer is saying better. But what you need to do in order to get there is to not just rely on publicly available internet data, like some of the current companies are doing with cutoff dates of 2021, but to rather feed that generative AI then also your own customized, quality assured, debiased, structured data sets that are more up to date on maybe the customer data you already have, or maybe you can buy the data from companies. I don't know whether Sears, for instance, does that, but where you actually refine the generative AI algorithm in order to make it more trustworthy. Just 2 comments.
Thank you. Amar, you want to comment? Otherwise, I have an interesting question here from the audience, but before I pick that, I would like to give you the floor.
Yeah. So thank you, Thomas. The use case I was thinking was enterprise search. There are a number of ways where I was involved in a number of different projects where we tried cracking this. Previous organizations I was with, namely Microsoft and Google. And I think that whole problem has been, it's come a long way into resolve that a lot easier than it has ever been before, especially with the use of Gen AI that you have. And I think that's a very interesting use case, because we're drowning in data at the moment. Every organization, and personally, whether it's commercially, we are drowning in data. And I think it could be a very valuable and compelling use case to be able to build a functionality. I mean, there are already solutions, pre-trained solutions out there available, but I think it could be a very interesting use case to look at and explore further.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to the next question from my list here, there's actually an interesting one that I want to bring up right now from the audience. You can either see it in the chat, but let me read it out loud. It's a long one, but bear with me. From developmental perspective, designing a pipeline for managing, storing, retrieving synthetic data to run ML algorithms on blockchain nodes can be tricky. Example, IoT devices managing supply chain data. Any suggestions on designing and architecting systems that use synthetic data and blockchain together? That's a very interesting question, and it leads right into some of the other questions that we had prepared. Anybody has a response? Or you may want to read it too. Okay, go ahead, please.
I'll take a quick stab. So first of all, synthetic data, you have to be very, very careful that you're actually generating something that makes sense for the real problem. Oftentimes, what I've seen with synthetic data is that you're making a beautiful solution to a problem nobody has. So make sure you're generating it with the same distribution as reality would have. Then, of course, combining that with blockchain is great, because you can keep the metadata in the blockchain. Who created it, when did they create it, attributions, so that you can make sure that nothing goes wrong, especially on the compliance, regulatory, ethical front. So I think that's a good thing. There aren't, as far as I know, any tools that you can just purchase or open source sign up for. I think that would need to be created, and there may be a good market for that to be created. Obviously, both sides of the technology are available in open source. So you, as a developer, if you are in fact a developer, could start from that open source basis and derive a combination product.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wants to chip in?
I think the use case, look at the reasons why you would use something like synthetic data and blockchain. Okay, so highly secure use cases where you've got very sensitive data which you can't really collect, which you can't generate because you got access to it, or you don't have the ability to do anything with it. Look at some of the value proposition behind it, for example, where if you had that data, you can use that data to build machine learning models, train machine learning models, as long as you have governance and you've done some sort of data quality on that after you've done the process. So I think that rather than jumping into a solution or an architecting option or a solution, you got to understand, well, where can I use these capabilities? What are the verticals, or what are the use cases we can potentially apply these to, and then go down that solution of technical architecture. So I think you've got to start with the idea, the why behind, where is this suitable? Where can we utilize these? and then look at the technology architecture that you could potentially utilize to deliver that capability. I would start in that structure or that fashion.
So in a mind of a Web 2 developer in AI, how can they shift their mind over to moving whatever they are used to and develop into and taking advantage of Web 3 and blockchain? Because in general, and again, I'm taking layman terms. I'm also learning as I'm speaking here and listening. I like to get a little bit more deeper, and I like to challenge all of you to help the audience to better understand the shift into the Web3 blockchain world from where they are today, which is Web 2 and AI.
Yeah, so one of the things, Thomas, that they have to do is get smart on smart contracts, right? Because the way to actually access data as well as share data and put algorithms to work and authenticate that they're the right algorithms is essentially all done through smart contracts. So you're going to have to get smart on how generative AI can help with smart contract drafting if you want to create a blockchain-based service like that that uses AI, or get smart on using it if it's somebody else's, right? But that's the core mechanism to truth and veracity assurance and to governing these transactional blockchains.
Okay, that's helpful.
I should also say, an example, for instance, is, and I think, Patrick was talking about search earlier, right? Internal corporate search, that's tremendously important. You could see the extension of that, which is obviously knowledge management, but then also the big problem of access rights to data pools, data lakes, data warehouses, right? You can wreak a lot of havoc on a data pool by allowing access rights to be too broad, because that increases the chances that data get corrupted again, right, by individuals who may not be fully data literate or just have good intentions but make mistakes, right? You also see the application of using those data lakes and certainly also external data. And this is, again, back to use cases in corporate training, right? So there's companies like Volley, for instance, who are using AI for real-time situational learning, right? So the AI realizes what you're typing into your Google search or your internal search or what document you're working on, and then says, look, here is a piece of knowledge from our own database on customer XYZ or supplier ABC that might really help you learn about what we did there, what worked and what didn't work. So this kind of situational learning that's semantically based and that you can put generative AI on. If it's your own data, then it's quality assured and more trustworthy. But that's also a high value use case.
Okay, that was an excellent feedback. Thank you. I have one other question to steer it into a different direction slightly. Anybody else wants to comment on the question we just had, particularly towards the blockchain and Web3?
Yeah, just a little thing that came to my mind, Thomas, about the mindset. You mentioned the mindset change for developers, and I think you've got to understand the characteristics and the attributes of these technologies. Web 3.0, for example, the capabilities, underlying technologies that build this framework, and then you've got to understand how can I shift, or what type of frameworks or languages do I need to start learning, and do I need to start picking up in order for me to work with, say, blockchain, Ethereum, for example, or distributed architecture, where you're completely stateless application stack that you have that you design with blockchain embedded in there. How do you because you must have to shift the way your tools, the selections that you make as a developer when you're building this capability. So I would highly recommend people to look into those new development frameworks, languages that are supportive of these fundamental technologies that power Web 3.0, for example. So that was just an input that from my side.
Okay, no, I agree with you. Different mindset, new tools, smart contracts, all of these are probably new terms, new technologies that a regular developer from the Web 2 world may not be too familiar with at this point in time. And they need to understand what the lay of the land is to move toward that direction.
Absolutely. And
let me, go ahead. Feel free.
there is frameworks and tooling out there that help you do this. So it's a case of educating yourself and researching a little bit to find out what the most widely used tooling out there that's available at the moment. For example, I just did a search just previously, and there's something called Solidity, there's Truffle, there's other frameworks available that you can pick up and use. But it's a case of using these tools. And look, when we're all learning, like we're all in a learning collaborative environment, and we have fantastic tools available to us to be able to allow us to do this. And Gen AI is one of those tools where you can do that, right? So
Yeah.
I would encourage people to have a very open mindset and actually think about what are the development areas that you need to make as a developer to move to a 3.0 capability and building and work with that technology stack. I'll
Okay.
stop there.
Yeah, no, it's good. Maybe one last question for everybody to tackle within a minute. And that is, how can we handle regulation and ethical legal risks as we are moving into that new direction? I know it's a big question, but if everybody can take a minute or so to address it or skip it, I leave it up to you.
Look, I would say from my perspective, that already starts with the project that you're selecting and the use case that you're selecting. I think we've seen examples of things going right, examples of things going wrong. So pick a few goalposts, right, of what you want to develop. Make sure that you think about things like bias that we talked about earlier, that you do make sure that aspects of diversity, if you're part of a team and developing that as a team, is core to what you do. Diversity of thought and of backgrounds and professional backgrounds as well. And then also, the very simple question at the very beginning, is that something that we should be developing in the first place? What good can it do? What harm can it do? And then weigh the risks, do a proper risk assessment there. Is that something that we should do in the first place? I think it starts with us individually, and then certainly extends from there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, completely agree, Andreas. That's very important. On top of that, I would add that we need to think about the use cases. There are plenty of use cases that are not going to be regulated. They're just nice and clean and ethical, and you won't have a problem. There are others that are in the gray area where you would have to be concerned. And then you would need to be concerned with different jurisdictions, because the Europeans, the Americans, the Chinese, et cetera, are going to have different opinions on whether or how much it's going to be regulated. And then you need to do your homework. There are also some things that you can build in natively in perhaps, for example, things to make it more secure or more explainable, that would then immediately cover the regulations that you would be impacted by. So if you think, like Andreas said, about the use case, and you think about the jurisdiction you're in, if you think whether or not this may even be regulated in the future, that will put you on a pretty safe path. Just one more thing to advertise. We're working on putting together a white paper at the moment that will cover how do various jurisdictions differ in terms of the regulation and compliance they're putting out. So you can go to documents like this to research how the different countries will want to impact your developer.
Thank you, Patrick. Olaf, I know this is one of your passionate topics. You're muted.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Thomas. Yes, I was frantically searching for a slide to show, because that's what we do. But yeah, so I want to support ask yourself, is it necessary for my business? Meaning, is it important for competitive differentiation that I absolutely need to develop my own models, and that I need to collect my own data organically, or can I go and buy both, or hire other people to do that for us? If there's no differentiation in this for us, right, then why spend the time? There's lots of developers out there that do this. Once you decide that you want to get in, though, and this is something, Thomas, if I may I'll share the final slide here, okay, which is you got to have a governance scheme in place, okay, and it doesn't, being small is unfortunately no longer an excuse. And I know it's cumbersome. I run a small company and we don't have a lot of overhead staff, so every hour counts, every FTE counts, right? Large companies have less of a problem with this, but you have to assure that from the board down and from the CEO down, if you're the CEO, right, you have to take personal responsibility for data governance and for model auditing. You actually have to, and the White House in its latest, banging of heads together there with the big tech bosses, as well as the new European AI regulation, are asking that you actually do that you understand the impact you have on stakeholder systems, not just customers, but stakeholders. So do some testing there, and then audit your models and make sure that they're privacy assured and that they function correctly and don't objectify people. And finally, data checks and data logs, right? And I think this is where I can't remember if it was Patrick or Andreas or Amar, just because you can collect data doesn't mean you should. And really be very narrow about that and purposeful, because that's where people get scared that you know much more about them than you admit or need to. So data checks, data logs, justifying who collected, why and how, on whom, and for what, right? So those are the 4 levels of governance. Whether it's Web 2 or Web 3 doesn't matter, because the regulators and really the people are going to come after you if you don't. But luckily, there are a lot of providers, service providers, who can help you do this at frankly reasonable cost, right? So not to worry.
Yep. Okay. So on that note, I knew Olaf had something to say that was incredibly useful and helpful. So thank you. On that note, we're actually a minute over the hour. I want to really a big thank you to Patrick, Andreas, Amar, and Olaf as usual. For all the listeners, the video will be made available in a few days. Share it with your friends. And for the developers who are listening to this, if you want to join the hackathon, I think we gave you some very good insights. So please feel free to join the hackathon. It's still ongoing until end of July, early August, and it will be celebrated in September towards the end with a hybrid conference in Palo Alto, in Mountain View, and also online. So with that, thank you, everybody. I wish everybody a wonderful evening or morning or wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank